All right, guys, if you have a question, put it in the chat. I doubt anyone is actually out there. So anyway, we're going to share the screen. And it's up there. Okay. Let's go to. So you guys have your. If you pull up the docs, I think it'll be the better thing. And then I don't have. then I don't have to. What do you call it? Like go back. I guess I can go back and forth. Let me pull up the DBQ docs.
Are they all on the?
It's the debate. It's the same. So the way the I guess to go over. I'm sorry. What was your question?
Oh, is it? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's the debate. So the DBQ will kind of combine, right? Like one of these and one of these, right? So it could be like political and social or economic and cultural, right? It's going to be some combination of one from debate 1 and one from debate 2. Does that make sense? So, and then the other thing is, and as you could kind of see in the debates, they tend to merge together anyway. It's hard to detangle all of it. So and I think a lot of you guys did a good job on that. So anyway, yes. So I think one of the things to think about is context. I think document A could almost look like be kind of a starting point, right? Because if we're looking at change over time, this is kind of like the starting point, and we could start with that. So let's talk about context, because I think this class we kind of talked about the need for more context. After thinking about it, what would be a good thing to set for context? I'll take the notes so you guys can just talk. Do you guys mind if I take a sip of this? I'll look the other way.
Is this context for like the Civil War and Reconstruction stuff?
Yeah, so essentially the question is, to what extent was the Civil War and Reconstruction revolutionary, right? And so for context, you usually want to reach a little bit before the Civil War.
I just like in the debate I talked about what was it? What about like Bleeding Kansas and stuff like that?
Yeah, so Bleeding Kansas.
And that was about the Mexican-American Civil War. I mean war.
So you can't just mention Bleeding Kansas. What do you think is important about Bleeding Kansas to bring up? Like
just about like the idea of having like the right to choose, and that there can be like free, just like I don't know, like if they were fighting for whether slavery was okay or not. There was already like conflict about like the position of like
yeah. What are the parts of the Dred Scott case? I think this one, to me, I like the Bleeding Kansas. I think is good, but it depends on what you're good at. If you're doing what you're doing. So if I was going to use Bleeding Kansas as context, and this is where I'm like, there's no wrong context, but I feel like there's a better context for whatever claim you're about to make. So if I use it Bleeding Kansas, what would I then like? You want to think about like how I'm going to lead it into my thesis, right? So like Bleeding Kansas might be good for like, I don't know, cultural or political, to compare later to like a unified nation, or to measure how united we are. I don't know. Does that make sense? Like, if I mention Bleeding Kansas in my context, then maybe I would be leading into after the war, it was more unified, or you could say it was the same, like we still had division. Does that make sense? But if you're mentioning Bleeding Kansas, you want to think about like a flow. You'd be like, okay, I'm going to use that as my set point to then compare it. Did it change or not?
That makes sense.
Dred Scott I like because it's got so many elements for political and social. And what are the elements of Dred Scott? One is yeah.
They, like, we still had to have property, so like also that kind of relates to like the fugitive slave act and how that the enforcement of slavery started like kind of going against the free slaves.
couldn't hear the end of that. What was that?
Like they're trying to like kind of overcome each other, and so they're just like doing fugitive slave after the Dred Scott case is just like examples of
Yeah.
the combating forces slavery and non-slavery, because like they're trying to enforce the laws of the South, but they're being enacted also in the North, which the North is like
Yeah. Yeah, so like the US federal government cannot regulate slavery, essentially making slavery legal everywhere almost, right? The Missouri Compromise was illegal. Okay. So these are like three, why I like Dred Scott. And like I said, there's not one better context than others, but why I like it is because it has so many set points, right? Before the Civil War, the Dred Scott decision said Black people are not citizens. There essentially could be no free states. People are property, right? It's reinforcing property laws, and the US federal government had no right to regulate slavery, right? And so it has all three elements of like political and social. Does that make sense? And it's very, very defined. You could do fugitive slave law, you could do John Brown, you could do, it depends on what you're going to lead into, but why I like Dred Scott, and it's not like the only one, is because it has very definitive, right? Because now we could see, right? If we set that set point, right, of this, if this is our set point for the beginning, then we start to see like revolutionary, how does this change? Does this make sense, right? I think if you wanted to, like you mentioned the market revolution, if we're doing economics, right? This is called sectionalism. You can always mention the cotton gin. Still bring it back. Right? You could do like the market revolution. Does that make sense? And sectionalism, that we have more manufacturing in the North, cotton gin in the South. If it was like an economic thing, like to what extent is that the same?
Talk about like the trading. I don't know what you call it, but like
oh,
it was like not transcontinental. It was like
the transportation revolution.
Yeah, basically like it wasn't like slavery from the Atlantic was like banned.
Okay, yeah.
And, like just within the states in like America, they basically like took national trade of slavery.
Internal slave trade.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's almost also too like Uncle Tom's Cabin. And it's a book. It's just it's a very sappy, sentimental book about slavery that made white people care. All right. Yeah. Transportation. You could talk about the transportation revolution, the canals, internal improvements. You could also talk about like Jackson. And how he was like a strict constructionist. Like vetoing the bank. So anyway, I think any of these things would be good, right? Because it would depend on what we then look at, right? The reason why I like Dred Scott is because it has like a lot of the elements that kind of correlate with like a lot of the documents. But if you wanted to maybe talk about trains, you could talk about the market revolution, you could talk about sectionalism. I always mention the cotton gin. Now, when we talk about complexities, sometimes, right? Okay. Let's say I give you guys a topic that is political and social, right? What would be complexity is you could bring in economic analysis. Does that make sense? Yeah. That would be like the because, right? So it's good to know all of this because then you have a bigger picture. And so when I narrow it down to 2, knowing that other one will be like complexity. So if I say, to what extent did you know, or vice versa. Can't see with them and I can't see without them. So yeah, so if I say like, all right, social and economic, and then you have like a really awesome political analysis with like Jacksonian Democrats and how it changed to Republicans and how that like had a major effect of a like because, and that's like your third element, that could be complexity. Right, so it can be another theme. And so by narrowing it down and maybe you bring it back, like maybe you don't mention market revolution in your intro, but maybe in like a paragraph, you're like, well, this also has to do with economic differences that started way back in like whatever, or this also has to do with political differences between the Democrats and the Republicans who then have now. Yeah, and usually complexity, it's not like a set rule, but usually it's like at least like a sentence or 2 that kind of like really explains it. To me, it's more of a because. To me, it's more of a because economics, because political, social, economic difference, because political, economic or political, social difference because economic. Does that make sense? And then that third is like, could be complexity. Anyway, let's go down. So like I said, if you don't use any of these in your intro paragraph, you could use them in some of your body paragraphs, and that could also get to complexity because you're also looking like a different time and place. So that's where it gets weird. Okay, let's take a look at some of the documents. So like doc 1, I guess I could put an additional one. All right, doc 1. What are we thinking? Is it revolutionary or not revolutionary, or do you think it just doesn't fit in? Yeah, so the document 1 is there it goes. Document 1 is a cornerstone speech. What do we take from this one? You don't think it's revolutionary, right? I think the one thing in this one to it's not revolutionary, obviously, but also it's the timing of it is hard because it's like 1861, right? So if we're looking at a question of how revolutionary, this is almost like a definition of what it was like in the beginning. I would almost call this like a definitional one. Yeah. Yeah, so positive good. Yeah, I think that's good. You know, it's a Southern Confederate, kind of like stating, not stating. What is it when you like say your beliefs, like your, yeah. It's not teaching. Like, I'm trying to think. Employing superior race, natural and normal condition, best, great philosophical moral truth. I almost feel like it's like a what is it when you like, you do something weird and you like, that's just a word. You like almost like make a manifesto or something. It's not really, but when you say your convictions, your beliefs, there has to be a verb for that. Yeah. holds
Also, like, just like legalization of Georgia, like you can have like knives.
yeah.
Not like even that, like that just shows like he's a southern is better than he's in like territory.
Yeah, deep south.
He's also he's living in Georgia. He's also dependent on slavery as well.
Yeah.
For social stability.
Yeah. What a lot of people mention this cornerstone speech for like whenever folks say that like the Civil War wasn't about slavery, people like to bring this one up because he's literally saying the foundational belief of the Confederacy is white supremacy, right? So yeah, I don't know if you guys remember this. I still use it. Promoted, proposed, inspired. Maybe promoted.
Yeah.
And I think this idea of like where I think you guys did a pretty good job in the debate is to define your like your beginning. And it's easy to just be like slavery existed and then slavery didn't, but you have to really start to like ratchet down your vocab. So it's like, you know, you have people as property, you have white supremacy, you have like what they're actually doing, like the labor of picking cotton, you have right, and so like you have to start defining like what parts of slavery are different, what parts of slavery aren't, which I guess also gets into complexity a little bit, but that's more just like a good analysis. Anyway, yeah, I don't think that is revolutionary or not. I think it's what document one, I feel like a lot of people who used it, it's a good comparison, right? If we were to like look through all the other documents, and what other document would you pair with document one to like be like there was a change or there was not a change? Like where do we see, I guess, like, does this make sense? So like if he's setting the standard for white supremacy in the beginning, and then if we also set up the definitions of people are not citizens, is there any documents you would pair with doc one to be like it white supremacy changed or white supremacy did not change?
I'd say it like did not change because comparatively with document B, like even though there was like a shift in governmental laws and like how they were enforcing enslavement, they still look kept black people at the bottom of black codes. Like in document E, like they still had white supremacy, still were trying to like
Okay, so we had document B, not revolutionary. And then, so like C,
that's one is like not revolutionary.
I kind of put it as a definition. I feel like it's hard because it's like, it's hard to say things have changed or not changed when it's like the very start of the time period.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So it's hard to be like, that's why sometimes you got to really look at the dates when you're using a document because it's like, I don't think you, I think using doc A well means you have to say like this is an example of of something that has been consistent, which is white supremacy.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So yeah, we could go over B, but anyway, what I think A works for is to like pair it with another document. All right, so let's just kind of go through doc A. I feel like it's more difficult, but B, you were saying B is not revolutionary. All right, see ya. Yeah. Yeah. Let's just go through the documents. So B was not revolutionary. you said still white supremacy. What else is not revolutionary?
Wait, what?
Document B. Did you say B? What was
I
document?
said D.
Oh, D is in dog.
Yeah, D
Is that the black codes?
yeah.
All right, I do want to go over that. Okay. What was document B?
Document B is the chart. Yeah, I don't really understand that because what does the last one say? It says tax revenues, but is that U.S. notes and bonds?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, it's bonds, notes, and tax revenue. Okay, first of all, what would we use this for most obviously? I don't know. This doesn't say anything about slavery. So this doesn't say anything about slavery. What did I do with it? This is about revenues. What are revenues? Let's start there. Yeah, revenues are taxes. And so what is the trend we see? Increase in taxes. Yeah, right. So bonds are loans that people would give to the government. It's not related. This is also the United States government. So this is more about the North. Does that make sense?
Okay.
This is about the North. Yeah. So this, I think, would go to Lincoln's, how Lincoln fought his economic war, right? And this really goes to like the disadvantage that the Confederacy had. One of the disadvantages the Confederacy has is that, like, they are a bunch of people who don't like central power, who left because they wanted states' rights, who left because they don't like taxes, who left because they didn't want to be told what to do. But then they're immediately put into like a war. And so then the government is like, we need to raise, like if you're in the Confederacy, we need to raise money, we need to like raise taxes, we need to have a strong central government because that's how you fight a war. And so the Confederacy had a disadvantage because it's like, how do you make these people pay, right? And so they just printed a lot of money, right? They just like had this like huge amounts of inflation because it was hard for them to get a bunch of like rich plantation owners to pay their taxes, which has been consistently a thing. So, but Lincoln, it's kind of like now that these folks are gone, he's gonna have like the income, he's gonna have the first income tax, right? He's gonna do war bonds. And war bonds are just basically like people loan money to the government expecting it to come back like in the future. So what sucks for the Confederacy is like if I was in the Confederacy and I bought a war bond, what happened to the Confederacy? It's gone. All that money is gone, right? So if I gave the Confederacy $1,000, I'm never going to see it back. But if I gave the U.S. government $1,000, I'll get it back with interest. Who? It's money. Yeah. So that is paper money.
So how is this like revolutionary?
I think it's revolutionary because it's the first income tax. And it's also like Lincoln is doing things that like the Whigs have wanted to do. Like it kind of almost goes back. If we wanted to do complexity, you could almost take it back to like Hamilton's plan. You know what I mean? Like having taxing, have a huge federal government and all these expenditures. And it's like he's able to do that kind of like while the South is gone. So I think it also shows more government in the economy. You know, like
federal, it's basically like
it's like the Hamilton's plan.
it's strengthening like the federal government.
Yeah, it's kind of like big government. If you were to make it political, it's big government. If it's economic, it's more government intervention, it's more taxation, it's more of that. Meanwhile, the Confederacy is not able, they do not have the economic powerhouse that the like US, the USA has. The CSA doesn't have that. So anyway, yeah, I think you could use this for any of those things. It is a kind of a difficult one. What's C?
So that's good. That's the amendment.
Okay, so the 13th, we shouldn't have it. So C, I think the only thing we could look at is could we make C anything not revolutionary? Is there anything not revolutionary about the 13th Amendment? Yeah.
There's still not like equality. They're just simply just being free. And that's it.
Yeah, I like that. Increase. I do want to put these two things.
And also, does Congress have like power to enforce Article 5 legislation? So I think like if the people in power are not black, like the appropriate legislation basically means kind of like possibly your people who won't really enforce this article.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that idea that they're just freed. I think the other thing a lot of people like to point out too is the loophole of imprisonment. What is the actual language of it? It's like punishment. So yeah, some of these you could kind of see. We'll just go kind of through. So then you get D, the black codes, and you guys said, is there anything revolutionary about the black codes? Is there? No. Yeah. Uh, I do have a question. Who did the 13th Amendment? If we were to analyze it, how would we say like it is Lincoln and radical Congress, right? And it's after you could maybe talk about the Emancipation Proclamation, right?
That could be like an outside fact too.
Yeah, that could be outside fact. Yeah, like Lincoln did the Emancipation Proclamation, and this is what actually frees the slaves, right? In the Emancipation Proclamation. The other thing about the 13th Amendment is like when the southern states come back into Reconstruction, they have to accept it. Anyway, okay. And who is doing the black codes is important. It is if you look at the author, right? So it's the southern states. And I think this is where, like, I don't know, in the lecture I tried to go over it, but it's kind of a really difficult concept. There's so much going on during Reconstruction, but it's like radical Congress does the 13th Amendment, and the states, does that make sense, try to like do something back, right? And then radical Congress does something else, and then the states, right? And so one important thing when you're writing this DBQ is to really think about like who is writing it. Is it the state? Is it, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So is it coming from the federal government, like an amendment? Is it coming from this person? So it's like it's important to think about like who is the person, where are they? Are they representing a Republican, right? Also, this would be like Republican. And this would probably be like Democrat, right? Because at this point, the southern states are Democrat, and the north, they're opposing that like northern. Does that make sense? So yeah, there's like political, there's federal and state power, but I can't think of anything revolutionary about the Black Codes other than, yeah, it's kind of like that. Okay. So then we're at A, B, C, D, E. I don't even know what that is.
It's just that advertisement I'm missing too.
Yeah.
So it's not good if they're having to look for.
Well, is it not good though?
Well, I feel like the situation is good.
Okay. So it is kind of,
After?
yeah. So 1870, yeah.
So it says that he was, says after the Civil War and Emancipation Proclamation, and it says that he was like sold to the highest bidder.
All right. A lot of people, let me see this. What does this say? He wrote me a letter in 1853, which is a letter that said he was, in 1853, he was sold to the, so yeah, I think a lot of people misunderstood this. This is someone who's putting like an advertisement, essentially people, so there's like black newspapers all over the United States, and so people would print these ads all over, and then you would read them and you'd try to be like, okay, has anyone heard about this person? The last time I saw my son, he was in Mississippi. He was sold away in 1853. You know, basically, I am here. If anyone knows where they are, tell me where he is. I'm in Kansas.
I mean, it could be like revolutionary socially because like they're finally able to kind of like ask where each other are and like they're starting to connect their cultures. Like their culture has been around for 70 years and like they've been separated like familial like attachments. So now they're able to put out a flyer. Like
Yeah.
they're able to write, which shows like they're able to maybe have more access to education now. So like
Yeah.
they're able to write a letter because they're able to be educated and try to find their lost family members that were sold away during slavery. So that's kind of revolutionary because they're beginning to be able to reconnect with people in some ways.
And I will say this, people are not property, right? Families are coming back together, right? Families, like this is one of the biggest things. As soon as people are freed, they're like, okay, where is my son? Where is my wife? Where, right? And they're desperate. And it does suck. It does suck because it's like, there's not like a federal, you know, I guess the Freedmen's Bureau, you know, there's nothing that is coming from the United States government that's like, hey, let's help these folks like make themselves whole, right? I think it is another example where it's like, you know, there's no land redistribution, there's no like federal help to try to like get these folks back together, right? But it does show, like you said, they're educated, they have their own publications, they are communicating, they are getting their families back together. So yeah. But yeah, I think a lot of people kind of, I guess it was an easy document to misunderstand. All right, A, B, C, D, E, F, where are we at?
I said that that's like is I mean like I don't know if it's like revolutionary or not because it's written like it could have bias because it's written by someone who's been made he's probably like a Republican. He's just kind of like saying that slavery doesn't exist anymore and how they've like rebelized this constitution. Like it just kind of like seems like he's just overdoing it because like there's still a lot of things that need to be fixed and he's just kind of talking about like he's just basically like shadowing the I don't know the amount like they still have to go to reach like more equality and he's just saying okay we freed the slaves like it's fine you know.
Yeah, so I don't know, maybe he's like political.
But it is revolutionary that like there actually is slavery.
Inspired witness, I don't know, deliberated accused, vision evaluated, I don't know, what is he doing here? I think you're right though. I think that the main part of this one is it's like 1866, so it's like right at the end of the war. He's like, yeah, we freed the slaves. Yeah, he's saying that everything has changed.
He literally calls it like the civil and political revolution.
Right.
And then it has, like, he's true about saying it has changed the government in some aspects, like constitutionally wise, but like it's not, I don't know, he just, like, it's probably a little oblivious to what the real situation is, because he lives in Maine and he's like a radical Republican, and like government, he doesn't live to see what's going on in that.
I like all this. I do think this one, this is a good example of okay, let me write this and then I could talk about complexity. This is when you have Congress as a radical Republican. I think you also talked about time, 1866, which is right after the end of the war. So he might be, I don't know, kind of celebrating their accomplishments almost.
Yeah, like,
No. Yeah. What is it, like a proud? I don't know, something like that. So yeah, that would almost be where I might actually put this over here. All right, so he literally says it's a revolution. I feel like this is where complexity, right, could come in. All right, so let's say you had a question that said, let's say I picked out economic and social, right? And then you have this document in there, and then an uncomplex use of this would be like Senator Lott, Moral, whatever, right? You know, said that it was a revolution, and then I just put that in my category for it was revolutionary, right? Does that make sense? And it's not wrong, right? It's supporting evidence that supports the fact that it was revolutionary. Complexity would be if I use the same thing, right? But I kind of put it in my not revolutionary thing. Although, right, Senator, whatever his name was, right, claimed that it was a revolution, and then I analyzed it away, he may have political implications as a Republican in a radical Congress in Maine who doesn't actually understand what's happening with black codes. Do you know what I mean? And then if I add that political analysis to something that might be like, that is complexity. And I think that's actually kind of where she got her complexity. That she was like, I don't even understand how I did it, but that's how she did it. Because she had this, like, she had a document that seemingly doesn't support her point, but she made it support her point by a third analysis. Although this on the face of it doesn't seem to support that it's not, it is, because really this is a political ploy. Does that make sense? So I think that is a good example of, like, you know, a B paper uses this as just as it is, and then like an A paper like uses it with complexity.
Okay.
I don't know. It's another kind of example. All right. I feel like we're starting to get somewhere. All right. What is the next one? So this is a cartoon. I do want to say this. We're going to look at a lot of Thomas Nast cartoons later. If if we were to analyze it, he is definitely a Republican. He's in the North. He's like, he's kind of like a political activist, cartoonist. So anyway, I will say that. Could we use this, if we were to look at this cartoon, what would we use as the verb? He's an artist, so I don't know. Illustrated? Yeah, I guess. What would be the automatic thing we could put in here? Yeah. And this could, I think, still be an outside fact. Would be like the 15th Amendment is not actually on there. It's not mentioned, right? Wait. Yeah, 13th, 14th, 15th, right to vote. Yeah, yeah. This, yeah, it's a real minor thing. This is actually created when Louisiana Black folks had the right to vote before the 15th Amendment. But yeah, you could link it with the 15th Amendment. It's also very like you could tell it's an empathetic view because they're showing like hardworking people are soldiers. You could also mention like the fact that like, you know, Black folks fought in the war, you know, if you wanted to go into depth. Yeah. Right. He's trying to kind of pull like these people deserve it, right? Or to support that. Okay. So, okay. All right, this is the thing on the 14th Amendment I talked about. Okay, so Doc H, would we put this as revolutionary or not revolutionary? I guess here. Yeah. Yeah. I gotta figure out who is arrested. Susan B. Anthony in 1872. I hate. Look up the 15th Amendment too. I guess it doesn't say male. Yeah. I guess they don't include gender here, so. I guess. Okay. Yeah. So it's kind of a continuation, and also if we did analysis, we do like Seneca Falls. All that. Is there any questions on that? Yeah, I think it makes sense now, but I think a lot of people didn't use it in the debate. So, all right, yeah, so probably do that again. So, all right, wait. And the picture is kind of the same, you know, so it could be one or the other. I guess, I don't know, how much time do we have left? Yeah, is there any other ones left that you have particular questions on? There's a lot, like I said, I'm gonna, depending on what topic I pick, I'm gonna be narrowing these down to 7. So that's why, like, unlike the other one where like yeah, so that's why like you guys, it's not like you can like rewrite it because you don't know like what 7 I'm gonna pick. So it's kind of like this is the population, and then like you don't know exactly what 2 combos, but then also like I'll be narrowing down. So if it's like social and cultural or something, I'll be taking out a lot of the economic things. If it's, you know, but document L.
I kind of thought it was good.
Okay.
Because like after like previously in one big plantation, no one had free, and afterwards, like there were a lot of homes, there were more farms, more productivity.
All right, L is the map. Okay. So you thought what?
Oh, well, I don't know. I just thought it was good because like previously it was a plantation, but like after
And I do think this is a good example of that. So like you have schools, right, where before it was illegal to learn to read. You have church, which before people called this like the hidden institution. We talked before about like how if there was a church on a plantation, it would be like a white preacher who was like trying to like use it as another form of oppression. And so almost as soon as folks are freed, the first thing they build is like a school and a church to freely express themselves and learn how to read. And it is family homes, and it was previously a plantation, right? And I think, I think the idea that it is intact, is that right? Families, people aren't being bought and sold, right? Anyway, it's also that like, on the plantation, if you lived on the quarters, like you would wake up when they tell you to wake up. You would work, you would go to bed when they tell you, you know what I mean? Now, right, you have that freedom, right? But what is not is like sharecropping, is debt. People call it debt peonage. You could call it like debt slavery. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think those are all, I think this is a perfect example of you could totally use this either way, right? You know, you have slavery, which some people call it by another name, where it's like debt slavery. You have, they do not own the land, they're renting it. And they're kind of, it was impossible for them to leave. And they're essentially engaging in the same economic activity, cotton
Like a
production.
cycle.
Yeah, it's that cycle of debt. So I think this is a good example of both, you know. So that is kind of that. I think what I'll probably do is
Could you also, for complexity, could you also like explain like why this may appear good and how like actually it was bad?
I think so. Yeah, I think usually with complexity, it's still, I would still probably try to like uh so I still think with complexity, it's better to think in terms of finding another reason that explains it. So let's say we use this for social, right? And let's say I used it for socially, like meaning is like, if I was a person, is my life drastically different after slavery? And I think you could use this for socially, it was, because yeah, you have your family, you have school, you have church, you have like, it is, I think, pretty significantly different. But economically, is it different?
Okay.
Right? And so I think if you kind of make those distinctions, like although socially it was different, and let's say economics wasn't a part of it, yeah, and then it's just like, although socially this seems different, economically people were still like basically had nothing and were working for nothing, still engaging in, you know what I mean? Like,
That makes a lot of
yeah, and so like, let's say economics wasn't a part of the question, and then you were like, you added that in as another analysis. Although it looks different, it really economically wasn't different. Yes.
okay.
Does that make sense? And then I think the other thing, an easy way, which we haven't like scoped out the whole entirety of it, is if you look at a different time and place. So I think that like where like a lot of people who did this, like if you did this at the end of the year, you could be like, we never finished the revolution until the 1960s. And then you brought in like Martin Luther King and like, you know what I mean? And like the civil rights marches that happen, like literally you have Martin Luther King on the steps in front of Lincoln, you know what I mean? Like talking about like, I have a dream 100 years later, right? And that's kind of like that it's a way to end it, and to be like, yeah, it started it maybe, but we don't actually have it until like the civil rights movement, or we're still asking for the same things, you know? And so that another analysis of another time and place, if you do almost like essentially two contexts, it's almost complexity, right? If you did, like I said, like say you analyze the market revolution and you analyze Dred Scott, I would count that twice. I would count one as maybe complexity. It's hard.
Okay.
I think of complexity as more of a because than a other example.
I like the way that you explained it about bringing in maybe something that isn't in the
Yeah,
questions and relating it to that.
yeah, yeah. All right. What I'll probably do in my other class is go through what we've already done and see if anyone wants to add anything. And then I'll try to fill in the rest of the letters in my other class. So I'll just keep the same document for my next class, and then it might be filled in.
We don't do it.
You don't have to.